Well, welcome everyone to Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross, where we are your resource for education, connection, and collaboration. You know, with a heart full of compassion and a mind fueled by knowledge, Rhiannon's journey from desperation to dedication is nothing short of inspiring. She's a certified functional nutrition counselor and a board-certified health coach, and she has dedicated her life to helping others and find their path to optimal health and wellness. Rhiannon's story is one of resilience and passion, and it's born out of the struggle to support her own chronically ill child. Rhiannon, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so it's quite the journey you've been through. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that before we start.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of touched a little bit on it already, but my daughter was actually born missing part of her immune system, and we didn't know that until she was almost 2. About 6 weeks old, we started noticing some things that were going on. She ended up being put on reflex medication. We were told she had MSPI, and all these different things. And it was just like one thing after another after another. And every single night when we would put her to sleep, she would scream bloody murder, like gut-wrenching just screams. And I just knew that something wasn't right. And then we got her up into, a little bit older, and she was just chronically sick every 4 to 6 weeks for about 2 weeks at a time. Wow. Always an upper respiratory infection. And it was just this endless cycle of like illness constantly. And I just knew in my gut deep down, like, this is not right. And eventually we got to the point that medication was being overused. It was being treated prophylactic. And so she was on medication and even when she wasn't sick. And it ended up frying her gut, essentially. Got rid of all the good bacteria. She had a yeast overgrowth, head to toe yeast infection. And wow. I knew that there was another way. We had to figure out another way for her. So it was a long journey for those first couple years, for sure.
I was going to say, yeah, that's pretty miserable, especially when you're not getting any sleep. And obviously she's in pain and not comfortable. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. So how did your personal journey with all of that lead you to your path to functional medicine and health coaching?
So I had actually kind of had a different, diverse background of things. I am a former anatomy and physiology teacher, so everybody knows that I'm a nerd just saying that. I also taught biology. When I was 12 years old, I knew I wanted to be a cytogenicist. I used to work in a genetics lab. So I have this weird background. I've worked in chiropractic and like done all these different things. And so I was already kind of surrounded, especially with the chiropractic, in natural wellness, right? Like growing up, we never like went to the doctor. If we were sick, we went to the chiropractor. It wasn't one of those things. And so being able to look at different things and be like, how can I integrate more holistic things into what we're already doing? Because, you believe the doctor and that's what you do and what a lot of people do. And then you get frustrated that like nothing is changing, right? Yeah. And so we started adding essential oils in. We started adding in herbs and different tinctures. And, that last time that finally she had that head to toe yeast infection, I was like, that's it. And somebody asked me the other day how long it had been that she had not been on medication. And it has officially been we've been in Florida now 8 years. So about 9 or 10 years, I would say, at least, that she's been on antibiotic, and she's now 12 years old. So,
that's amazing.
It's definitely been a journey for sure, but that's that process of like moving away from traditional Western medicine. Now there's a time and place always for it. However, in a situation, it was doing more harm than good. It wasn't helping her at all.
Yeah. So. And I'm with you. There's a time and place for it, and it has its use, but a lot of the stuff that they put you on, there are so many side effects, and who knows with what of those side effects made something worse or maybe even created something new.
Exactly.
So you did function nutrition, but what inspired you to specialize then in supporting individuals with the MTHFR mutations?
Yeah, so we didn't know anything about MTHFR. I did not until we moved to Florida. So we had that testing done, determined she had an IgA deficiency when we were still in Nebraska. I had done a
Okay.
lot of research.
Real quick, because
Yeah.
you're a nerdy thing, and we were talking once before about acronyms. What does the
Yes.
IgA stand for?
So IgA is an antibody. There's several different antibodies in your body, and that one specifically is going to support the respiratory tract. And
Gotcha.
so that one is why she was having those upper respiratory infections, because she didn't have an immune system in that area to fight them, essentially.
Okay.
And so we determined that. I texted her pediatrician one night on a Sunday at like 10:30 and was like, hey, I think she's got an antibody deficiency. And she was like, I think you're right. Let's get her tested. So she was about 2 years old when we figured that out. And it was a huge relief to just know, like, oh, there's a thing, right? Like, there's no cure for this, but at least I'm not nuts, right? Like, yay. So then we moved to Florida, and we moved to Florida, the new pediatrician that we had tested, just based on her medical history, all that stuff. And both my kids had it. And I was like, well, what is this? And so I dug down the rabbit hole. And the first thing I did was get a vaccine waiver, because I was like, well, we don't want to no toxins in your body. And we already were anti-vaccination because I worked at a chiropractic office and I had been to all the things. And I was like, this is definitely a no for my children, knowing that my brother and sister had reactions to vaccines and things like that. So, but I wanted that medical exemption. So that way, if ever they needed it, it wasn't just a personal belief thing. So that was the first thing I did. But then after that, it was like, well, what do I do now with this information, right? Like, okay, I need to change diet. We were already dairy-free, gluten-free. Like, we were already on that journey from the experience beforehand with my kids and some food sensitivities and behavior things that we were dealing with before. But that rabbit hole took me down a whole new path. And really, like, with me being a nerd already, I loved genes. And so I was like, okay, well, let me do some more research. And it's been a journey. But now I love being able to tell other people, like, could be an issue for you. Maybe you should get this checked. Maybe this is something you need to look at. And if they have it, what other genes could be causing this or causing other symptoms that you're experiencing that are like red flags in your body going off, right? It's like your check engine light.
Right.
Like, something is not working.
Something is wrong.
Yeah. So, it's been about, let's see here, two-ish years now since I've been done now with my program. And I just decided to pursue it because one day I was doing some video coaching with a coach I had for another business. And I followed his format and did a TikTok, and it went crazy viral, and it was on MTHFR. And he was like, I think you should do something with this. And I was like,
well, especially since you love all that information, like you said, you're a nerd, you go down that, because it's very overwhelming. And if you're already in that realm and you can understand terms and stuff more, it's different. But for other people, it's just like, it's like reading Greek. It's like, okay,
it is.
what is this?
Well, and that's the thing too, is like most people come to, they're like, I don't understand this, or I've done all this research. And I'm just like, it shouldn't be this difficult for people to get support. And really, you don't need to know how the body works. You just need to know how to optimize it. And that's through your diet, your lifestyle, and your nutrition, and which is what I focus on. So I will never be the teacher that, goes and tells you, this is how the Krebs cycle works. So these are all the things you need. No one cares. They just care that you can help them and that you are knowledgeable enough to get them on the track to wellness. That's it.
Right. Now, and you've mentioned genes a couple of times. So is this genetic?
Yes. Yep. Okay. MTHFR is a gene. And that's something that's inherited from one or both parents. And so you can have one copy or two. And it affects methylation. So it's going to be around 200, several hundred processes in the body that affect or are affected by methylation. So DNA repair and replication and all these different things. And then symptom-wise, symptoms like ADHD and autism and migraines and chronic fatigue, and there's hundreds that are tied to methylation. And so it's generally women that come to me. I have had, a few men, but women are my predominant client, and they're the ones that are fatigued because they're doing everything. They're working, they're juggling the kids, they're doing all this stuff, and they just can't get the support from the medical community that they need. And so they're tired and they're frustrated and they're overwhelmed and they feel like they need to have a PhD to figure out what's wrong with them.
Speaking of PhD and and methylation, you want to tell everybody what MTHFR stands for?
So it's methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase is what MTHFR stands for. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I was just like, gotta explain our acronyms here. We get carried away sometimes. I've done it with the military too. You just start spitting stuff out and people like look at you like, okay, that's different language.
Yep. Exactly.
So can you share a defining moment of when you realized the impact that, the mindfulness had on your own health and well-being with all this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for all of us, the big thing was COVID times, right? Like that's really where I started to like look after things and be like, okay, I want to, change things in my life. I'm overworked, I'm burnout, I'm stressed, for myself. And so I had to start making changes. And for me, obviously, if both my kids have this, I have it too. And I know that because I've had my whole genome sequenced, but that tells you how nerdy I am. But for me, it was like, how can I take simple practices into my daily life in order to rest assured, not live in this constant fight or flight? And I was talking to a client about this the other day, and I said, I no longer live like I'm in a state of emergency. And I feel like, especially with all the chaos of the world, of life, of kids, and, all the roles that we play for all the parts that we play in our lives, it's a different stress, and they're constantly coming at us. And we are almost conditioned to be in a constant state of flight or flight, right? Yeah. And so during COVID, I think for my family, for me, it was very triggering because when my youngest was chronically ill, we couldn't go places, we couldn't do things. And it felt like I was in this prison, right? Like I could never take her to go have a fun weekend because she was sick, or I had to be, and so that lockdown situation kind of brought that back up for me. And I didn't realize how much that affected me at that time. And so I started doing daily walks. And those daily walks were for my mental health. And they're also obviously cardiovascular, like good benefits and stuff too. But that was my time to go listen to a podcast or go, be pissed off and just like, vent and just like have some jam music on and just be like, whatever I needed to do in that moment to move my body. And, that's when I started getting therapy, and that's when I started doing things to take care of my mind as a person so my nervous system could start to get work on, right?
Right.
And that's taken years, but journaling also huge thing for me. So one thing I work with my clients is the nervous system, and in my program, when I work with people, it's, here's nutrition. That's a big part of what I do, but the nutrition's not going to absorb if you're in a state of fight or flight.
Right.
So that mindfulness is so important with your daily routines and waking up every single day and having intentions for your day, and not just like waking up and going into action, because then you're in fight or flight right out the gate every single day. And you're going to live that cycle of burnout over and over and over again and can't figure out why you can't get out of it because your nervous system is just overwhelmed. So mindfulness is a huge piece of not only mental health, but physical health, and also your gut-brain connection,
right.
And how those two are integrated for sure.
Yeah. So before I ask you the next question, I'm curious because like you said, you had the gene and you're having any of the kind of pains or struggles like your daughter had in your growing up. Do you remember having that or challenges?
Obviously with her stuff, it's a little bit different with her immune system, of course. But I've recently found out in my own health history, because I was not close to my biological father until recently. I've reached out to kind of get some medical things, and I'm seeing that runs on his side of the family, like ADHD, autism, Asperger's, things that we deal with this stuff. And I, as an adult, have realized that I have ADHD. I, self-diagnosed, so whatnot. But to me, paying somebody to tell me what I already know, it's like, I'm good. Like, I'll just manage with my supplements and my nutrition, which is what I would do anyway. But for some, those of us, it's validating, right? Like just understanding. So I definitely would say my experience isn't like hers as far as health-wise, but knowing that as an adult has changed my entire perspective on myself. Because I can understand myself better. And it's very validating, especially when I'm around other people that have ADHD that are like, yep, you got the zoomies today. And I'm like, I guess I do. And I just thought that was just, being weird, So it really brings a sense of peace, of awareness to who you are when you understand how your body works.
Yeah. I was just curious because when you talk about her, like, screaming, like bloody murder in the middle of the night and not doing that. And some people have the ability to remember way back when they were that young and others don't. So I was just kind of curious if that you happen to remember going through any of that.
No, and her health is, she's definitely medically complex compared to like any of us else. But I did find that my father's sister is also has an immune deficiency as well. And and ADHD and all the things that we're dealing with mine. So I'm like, oh, this makes so much
and all
sense.
the other labels they want to throw on you. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But I'm like, it's so validating to feel like you're not crazy when you find those things out, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Or
So,
feel like you're not the only one. Yeah.
yeah, and it's funny because he's like, oh, my sister, she has done this and this and this and this research, and she's found that diet nutrition, and I'm laughing because obviously he doesn't know what I do, and I was just like, yeah, diet nutrition is important. But yeah, very validating for sure.
It's funny how that comes around. So
Yeah.
what would you say, what ways would you say mindfulness transformed your approach to supporting others to their wellness journey?
Well, when you look at a person as a whole person and not just a symptom, I think that's the big part, right? And so we have all these specialists for different things, but they don't look at you as a whole body approach, right? And how your nervous system is interplaying with, your anxiety, and how your genes are interplaying with your anxiety, and how your foods are interplaying with your anxiety, and all these things, environment, the toxins and the overload and all this stuff, right? And so once we can look at a person as a whole person, and like I have myself and understand myself better, I'm able then to work with people on a different level because then I can relate better. Right? And I feel like a lot of people or a lot of practitioners, they go into medicine or whatever they go into because they enjoy that, right? But they don't maybe have the personal experience. So they necessarily can't connect with the client on a level or a patient on a level, and they just go through their day like a robot, right? And just like next.
Go through their script. It's like everybody seems to have a script, and yeah, we don't all fit in a neat box.
No, exactly. And so everything I do is customized with each client. Like a client I have now, she's like, I'm overwhelmed. I've got this going on, that going on. She's launching a business. And I was like, we need to work on your nervous system while we're working on your nutrition. And normally that comes, later down the line. But just in the last 3 weeks, she's like, I'm already noticing a difference in my anxiety because she's removed theory, which is highly inflammatory. And I was like, yeah, theory does the same thing to me. Like, it makes me crazy, grumpy, and just really anxious, She's like, why? I'm like, it's inflammatory. Your body's responding, and the only way that it knows how to. But we have to also work on those transitions in the morning and getting up and setting those intentions. And it's a whole integrative approach. I don't just look at nutrition. I look at you as a whole person.
Yeah, and you kind of just strolled right into my next question, which was, how do you tailor your guidance and support, to meet, because we're all unique, so we all have our own unique needs, and I'm sure there's, like you said, there's many different variations of the MTHFR. So
yeah, so with that, a lot of people will come to me and be like, oh, I already know I have it. I don't need to be tested again. And I'm like, wrong answer. We are going to test you again. Every single client that I work with, I retest them, and this is the reason why. Because most people that come to me have had testing, but they've only either tested 1 or 2 genes. They've only done a select few, only know 1 or 2 things, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know other genes that could be interplaying or why that this is contributing to each other. And so I test for 150 genes, and then we're able to go, here's the top 3 pathways we really need to focus on because these could be the most problematic based on the pairs of genes you have. And then here's the lifestyle changes you need to make specifically. Here's the supplements that are suggested for you specifically. And here's the foods that are suggested for you for your gene pairs. And so that's how we customize and tailor that to them. And then they have actionable items that they can take and run with because they go, oh, okay, well, that was so much easier than just thinking like homozygous, heterozygous, met val, whatever. Like, people feel like they need to have a freaking degree in the genetics in order to do this stuff. And like, you don't. You just need a comprehensive test that lays it out for you in a way that you understand. So then that way you can take action from it, because it doesn't do you any good just to know that you have one gene. Like,
right.
Like, okay, you need to know what other ones. Do you have dopamine ones? Do you have issues with histamine? Do you have issues sleeping? Can THC cause an issue for you if you're taking it? Because a lot of people do for pain, for sleep, and it could cause adverse things for them. Like, and so being able to be like that, they're like, oh, that makes sense as to why X, Y, Z. And I'm like, yes, but, like our genes are telling us things. We just know how to read them and to look at them. And this testing makes it so simple to customize that approach for each individual.
Yeah, and that's neat because, like I said, we are unique, and the fact that you can actually take that time and dive deep in with that person, because most of the doctor, and I don't go to doctors very often. I don't go unless I absolutely have to, because I'm like you. I'll research and figure out how I can get rid of it naturally. But a lot of them just don't have the time or don't spend the time to dig in that deep with college. So if nothing else, you can at least provide them with education that says, hey, here's, if you really want to, here's what you need to be asking. I think sometimes maybe people just don't even know what to ask.
Exactly. And I had a girl come to me this week, and she's like, I had this practitioner sit down with me for 4 hours and give me like, here's all the things about methylation, and here's all the things about this, and this is an educated guess, trust me, based off one gene. And I'm like, I'm not comfortable with that. I would never sit there with, like, my program's 12 weeks and I teach you all the things like nutrition, like all these different things, but I'm not going to sit with you for 4 hours and one shot, your head's going to explode. Like, as a teacher, I know, one, you need breaks, right? Yeah. Like, you're overwhelmed. It's a new topic. And she was so overwhelmed. She's just like, I don't know what to do with any of this information. Do you think I should take these supplements? And I said, I can't tell you that without looking at a bigger picture and understanding what tests have already been run, what things that she's given you. Like, I don't feel comfortable as a practitioner saying yay or nay. Like, you have to trust your gut on that. And if you are not happy with the fact she's not responding to you, you're overwhelmed, you're not getting answers, then that should be the answer that, you take and kind of go with.
Yeah. And it's not only that, because I remember when my fiance was like diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and I am trying to like learn everything. And then I felt like everything was contradicting itself. But when something like really hits you, it's almost like your ears shut off. So they might still be doing this, but you're really not hearing them because your head's still swimming on this one that you just heard. So I can't imagine 4 hours that I mean, it's nice that they want to spend the time to do that, but
right.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not sustainable for anybody. And then she's like, well, I can never get a hold of her because I'm texting her, and she's like, texting me back that she's busy or I don't hear from her. And I'm just like, yes. Yeah. So that's, some people may be good at what they do, but there's other parts that need improvement. And we're all human, right? We all have our things. But when people do one-on-one coaching with me, I'm like, you get access to me through the portal. Like, that's the whole purpose, is to get those questions answered. Like, that's why you're working with me on an individual basis. And I don't take a lot of clients one-on-one because of that. Yeah. I don't, because I want to make sure I have the capacity energetically to support these people on their journey and not overdo it and overextend myself, that I can't live up to what my intention was of why I started my practice in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of taking breaks, we need to take a break real quick from a word from our sponsors, and we will be right back. And I know you have more tips of stuff you can give people, where to start. So stay with us. We will be right back.
Hey, we got soul. Oh yeah, we got soul.
Are you a woman that's been dealing with being gaslit by the medical community? Inside, you're not feeling right. Maybe you're struggling from anxiousness, sadness, bloating, unexpected weight gain, or even trouble sleeping. What about focus and concentration? Has your ability to complete tasks become impaired over the years? Has it gotten worse? If your labs are normal, it doesn't mean that things are normal. It means we need to look deeper, beyond the surface, and take a comprehensive look at your genes to determine what's going on and what could be triggering these symptoms, even if your labs are normal. Hi, my name's Rhiannon. I'm your MTHFR coach, and I help you go from overwhelmed to optimized in 90 days without spending endless hours on Google. And if any of those things that I just mentioned resonate with you, I would like to introduce you to the MTHFR gene. If you're not familiar, please text this number below with the word MTHFR, and I would be happy to give you some free resources to get started with learning about MTHFR. To learn more about comprehensive testing and other support options, visit my website.
So Rhiannon, for someone new to mindfulness, what simple steps or practices would you recommend for integrating mindfulness into their daily routine to help them with this?
I think it really starts with making space in your day for what you're looking to achieve, right? And so we talked a little bit about like setting your intentions in the morning, going through that start of your day. making space, whether that means getting up a little bit earlier, journaling, maybe that means going for a walk, enjoying the moment and really being present is really what mindfulness is, right? And so if you can just take that time, whatever that looks like, maybe it's sitting outside on your porch with a cup of coffee with no kids around, like that just gives you that little sense of peace to transition into the day, to kind of mentally prepare, to be fully engaged with the birds chirping or the wind blowing or whatever. No phones, nobody else, just you and your body. That really is a great place to start, in my opinion. You know, moving your body is a great way to process your feelings and emotions as well. So when I started therapy, that was one of the things that my therapist was like, I think you should go on a walk. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. She's like, move those emotions. Don't let them get stuck. And that made so much sense to me. So that's like a habit for me too after therapy is like going for a walk, like need to process, you know, and so having that way to kind of release those things and move them through the body so those emotions don't get stuck is also, I think, a huge piece in mindfulness. But, you know, there's so many different activities. You can do yoga, you can do Pilates, you can do meditation. And we go through all of this stuff in my program too. I have different experts that come in that are able to share their experience, but I think really it just starts with a morning ritual of time for yourself.
Yeah. So what would you say with all that? Because you're based on nutrition and everything. Mm-hmm. How would you help somebody like improve their relationship with food and their overall wellness?
That's a great question because we all have different experiences with food, right? Like we either overeat or we undereat, or maybe we eat in front of the TV or on the go. Maybe we're scrolling through TikTok or whatever while we are eating.
Comfort food.
Mm-hmm. And maybe growing up we had food scarcity, right? Maybe we lived in a food desert. You know, there's all these different things. Maybe religious beliefs come into play too with like fasting and things like that. And so I've just created a workbook and put that into my program to ask, like really like to analyze, what is your relationship with food like? Do you have a healthy relationship with food? Because that's a huge piece, right? Like, and I want to know what that's like for you. What were your experiences growing up? Because if you have a poor relationship with food and you tend to overeat because you had food scarcity growing up, then that's something we need to work on, right? Like we need to figure that out. And so that's a conversation we can have in our sessions together for sure. But I don't think a lot of people spend enough time and have the awareness, right, to sit with that and think about it, because it's not something they've ever been asked to think about.
Yeah. Awareness is a big thing. And it's something that I was tuned into recently, over the last couple of years. You know, we don't often think about that we're eating because we feel like we're munchy, but if you sit and listen to your body, you might not actually really be hungry. You're not hungry, but you're just eating bored. To eat, either because you're bored.
Yep.
Yeah. Bored. People that are stressed, you know, we always say chocolate, give me chocolate or the comfort foods. Mm-hmm. I don't remember ever in my day or in my years of school of that ever even being, you know, discussed.
Right. And now, like, you know, we will buy things that are fast, easy, and cheap, and the results aren't fast, easy, or cheap to get rid of them, right? Yeah. Like if you compound that over time, then you're going to have some health problems, right? And what they have taught us in the past about, you know, the food pyramid and food plate and all that stuff is garbage. Dairy, you need dairy. No, you don't. It's all marketing campaigns for all these big companies. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's all it is. It's not something your body actually needs. And we buy a lot of our food now in the center of the store when we need to be focusing on the outside of the store, right? And so just different things for people to think about and shifting their mindset around food, that it's not something to, it's not meant, it's meant to be enjoyed. Don't get me wrong there, obviously. Yeah. I'm a foodie. I love food, right? I used to be like 70 pounds heavier. I love food and I can eat me some food, but it's also knowing your hunger and fullness cues, making sure that you are getting enough water, because if you're dehydrated, you can actually be getting those hunger cues, but you're actually dehydrated, you know, and stress eating, binge eating, all that stuff. If you tend to overeat, like I said, as a child, you didn't have enough food, but you didn't have that awareness, and then you're like, oh my God, that makes sense as to why I do what I do. And you can consciously work on changing that behavior once you're aware of it.
Right.
But before that, if you don't know where it stems from, you're just going to keep doing it and be like, why can't I break this pattern? stop beating yourself up and realize where it stems from. Like, that's why. Like, that's what you need to do. Yeah.
You always hear from a lot of people, it's like, well, if it's good for you, it can't possibly taste good. And I know that's not true. It's a matter of what you do. You get things with it. But I think a lot of times we don't pay attention either, because we may really love the taste of something. But if you take the time to actually listen or feel what's going on with your body, are you getting gassy? Are you suddenly feeling sluggish or like you should pass out and sleep? Or that's kind of your body, if I'm not wrong, that's your body's way of saying that food's not good for you.
Yeah. And it could be a simple situation that's an easy fix, like your gut health, right? Like I had a situation before I came into, doing what I do now several years ago. All of a sudden I had this huge aversion to meat. Every time that meat was cooking in my house, I wanted to vomit. And I was just like, what is wrong with me? Like, I'm not pregnant, clearly. But like, what? Ew, why? And so I did a food sensitivity test, and like every food came back, which was like a giant red flag that my gut was like destroyed and I needed to work on it. And so I did. And that went away. Like now I eat it no problem. So it's just so interesting that our body really tells us, it whispers, so to speak, until it screams.
I was going to say until it screams.
Right. And you just have to be able to sit with yourself and know, like, oh, I have a runny nose after I have tomatoes. Maybe I should stop eating them, or my throat itches, or, like people just think that that's part of eating and it's not normal, but they'll keep eating the same thing. And
like the way it tastes.
Exactly. Right. And so, yes, our body will constantly give us those cues, but we don't generally know what they mean. And so we just keep doing it.
It's almost like somebody that does shopping therapy, or retail therapy. They go out and they buy this stuff, and it's like, why did I buy this? I really didn't need it. Or then they have buyer's remorse, but now it's too late to return it or do anything.
Sure.
And it's like, and you keep that circle going. You got to break that circle.
Yep.
So what advice would you give to beginners on staying consistent with like mindfulness practices, especially during challenging times? Because people struggling with this, I am sure you have had multiple challenging times.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's been times that I'm just like, the mental breakdown piece comes into factor, right? And I feel like we all have gone through that, especially with COVID. Like COVID just flipped our worlds upside down, right? And so a lot of things that maybe we hadn't experienced, it brought up and resurfaced that we didn't even realize was a factor for us or part of our, patterns or who we were or any of that stuff. And so when you're starting something, always make sure that you are being patient with yourself, because any new change is going to take time. And really setting that intention is also important of like why you're doing the thing that you want to do, right? Like, what is the result that you're going to get from doing this? What are you trying to accomplish by doing this? Like for my kids know, like, Mom, did you go for a walk today? Like 6 days a week, I walk. Right. And I have one day to potato. I call it my potato day. And that's the day that I get to read or just lay around. Like my body physically rests that day. My mind may be going and I may be like doing other things to get stuff done, but following my energy at this point in my life is very important. So starting on a mindfulness routine, getting back into those things. And even if it's just a little bit, like 5 minutes, do it. Just do the 5 minutes. Build your way up. Don't feel and put the pressure on yourself. Oh, I have to go walk 10 miles every morning. No, like go walk for 10 minutes. Like that's it. Like just create that sustainable change, because if you don't do it simply and try to overdo it, you're not going to do it. Just plain and simple. Like when I first started journaling, when my therapist was like, you should journal. I'm like, what do I write? Like I hadn't had a diary since I was in like middle school, right? I was like, what do I even write? Now I just write, and I'm a writer. I love to write. I've got, books published, whatever, but I enjoy writing. So that's not a thing that I don't like to do. It's just like, but what do I write? I just like summarize my day, what I'm feeling, how I'm doing, what things are coming up. Like just any of that. Anytime you start something new mindfulness, just start low and slow and ease your way in. And just like I do with anything else in my practice that I work with.
Oh yeah. And that's a good point, because a lot of people like they put these big audacious goals on them and it's like, well, then they never get started, or they start and they're like, well, I can't do this. Well, you started like way too big, just little chunks. Like they say, you eat an elephant one bite at a time, just do little chunks and you do a lot better. But like you just said, another point you made was being patient. It took if you're older, it's taken you years to get this. It's no magic wand. We don't wave it and it's gone tomorrow. It takes time to reverse damage or habits and fix things.
Yep.
Yeah.
And having the awareness of like, why do you feel like you want to do these things, and what changes do you really want to make? Like really understanding the purpose of why you're doing it is going to help to create that intention of continuing to do it, even if you don't necessarily notice a change right away.
Yeah, and that takes some time to stop and think too, because we're always in that busy mode that we just go, or we either just accept it or stash it aside. We don't necessarily think, okay, so why did that make me angry, or why did this do that? We just whatever, blow a fuse.
Well, right, and we're autopilot. Like, it's just, and that's the thing. Like, I've noticed, like I said, I don't live like my life's in a state of emergency anymore, and I can tell by how I respond to things instead of reacting to them. Like, my nervous system is much calmer. I can notice things, like, and when my kids make me upset, I can sit there and be like, okay, Rhiannon, let's like have a pep talk in my brain of like, what, like, don't scream at the kid. They're just trying to do the thing. They like, it's, but it's just a different experience when you can slow down and allow your body to move through things instead of just flying off the handle all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you share a success story of a client maybe who saw significant improvements in their health and their well-being from your personalized approach of wellness?
Yes. Okay. So I had this client come to me when I first launched my program, and she was experiencing chronic migraines. She had been on a daily inhaler or daily antihistamine and an inhaler for years due to allergies. She was on an antidepressant. She was on a blood pressure medication. She was super nauseous, didn't really eat. She'd gained a lot of weight. She was uncomfortable. And she had been working with all these practitioners and knew she had MTHFR, but nothing was like sticking, right? So we first started with the nausea. We're like, let's get curious with that. So we did some things there. Ran her, of course, blueprint. While her blueprint was coming back, we started to work on all these little things, right? So we started with the nausea. Then we were like, okay, we got her to eat in some food, got her some nutrition that she needed, like some powdered nutrition that she could take, some greens and golds and reds, just, different things that she could do because she wasn't getting enough nutrition in her body. And I knew that that was a big thing for her because she wasn't eating. She was nauseous all the time. So we did that. We ended up, over the course of 6 weeks, of course, always talk to your doctor, but she ended up getting off all of her medications. She ended up losing 55 pounds, which wasn't even a goal when she started, but the inflammation she had and had been carrying, it was uncovered that she had an issue with her mast cells. And so she was constantly activated. And so that's why she was getting the headaches, and they were very hormonal and tied to all these things. And so she had huge results, and she was so happy. Even after, like, we were halfway through the program, she's like, I can't believe all these changes. And by the end, she was like, I lost 55 pounds. So I was like, what? So, just like working through that it's just such a blessing for me as a coach because I'm not doing the work. It takes a lot for the person to be doing the work. I'm here to support, to lean on, to guide, to, do those things, but I can never do the work for people.
Right.
But when the people come to me and they're ready to do the work and they see the results, I'm like, hell yeah, you did it, girl. Like, that's awesome. So yes, that one is one of my favorite ones for sure.
Yeah, that is wonderful. And like you said, your program's like 12 weeks. So this is like about 6 weeks, halfway through. She's saying, like you said, it takes time. Because I know if you've had something that all of a sudden something's changed, you can't just like wipe out everything that you did that day. It's like removing one thing at a time to see if it made a change or not.
Yep. And that's exactly what we do. Everything that I do in my practice and my program is low and slow. So any new things that we did, we would try one thing at a time because that's something that this other client that came to me the other day was like, oh, she gave me this pile of supplements and told me to take them all and it would be fine. And I was like, no. That's terrible advice. Because you just don't know then if something's going to cause something, or like if she's guessing, like, based on your symptoms, I think this. Yes, there's a lot of times that I do that, but I also have worked with specific genes enough to know which ones could be causing those different symptoms and which supplements to recommend, or if we should wait on that to confirm before we do any more in that way. But always low and slow. Everything that we do. Any new foods, any new supplements, 1 to 2 things at a time. That's it.
So have you done in your research, broken it down then, like you said, in supplements and stuff, to know certain things that are in supplements that could be triggering certain causes?
It really depends on the person's gene pairs of how things will work for some people, because a lot of times with methylation issues, we have detox issues, especially. And so if you can't properly detox, it's like a dam that's just backing up, right? So if we're able to start opening up that, you're going to likely feel like crap to begin with. Like, that's just part of it, right? Because your body's like, whoa, what's happening here? Like, it doesn't really know how to respond. And so there's things called like a Herxheimer's reaction where you can feel worse before you feel better. And that's totally normal. But that's why I do low and slow. That's why I go, okay, well, this one is one that I recommend to everybody that has MTHFR because I know you're not detoxing the way that you need to. And so this one is going to be something we're going to start off with. We're going to do it a few days. If you overdo it, you may get gassy. You may have some SIBO we need to work on. But I'm not ever going to throw anybody like a pile of things because then I won't know. But I'm very specific with which brands of products that I'll use because I want to work with brands of people that are familiar with MTHFR that have gluten and dairy-free products, no soy, like all the things. So,
Right.
yeah. So I don't want any added fillers or any garbage. So I'm very particular.
Yeah.
But I do always ask too, because there are other genes when people, because a lot of times online, especially with influencers right now, everyone's like, if you have ADHD, take methylfolate. And that is not the answer for everybody. For people that have a slow COMT, that can actually exacerbate their symptoms and make them worse, which is what this girl I was talking to the other day, she's like, well, she told me to take this. And she said, based on I'm an educated guess. And I'm like, anybody that's already anxious and depressed, I will not put on a methylated vitamin if I suspect that they could have a COMT issue based on other things. I just won't do it. Now, can some people tolerate those? Sure, in low doses. But do I want to mess with that if their mental health's already in question? No. I'm not going to do that. I think that's irresponsible.
Right.
So I will give you a non-methylated version to support you, and so you can still get the things that you need without worrying that your anxiety is going to be worse, you're flying off the handle, you're sad, you're suicidal, because people have had these experiences when they've come to me, and so I don't want to do that. I think that's ridiculous and incredibly irresponsible people, especially people online. So I'm screaming into the abyss online, don't do it! There's other alternatives!
Well, and that's like any of the companies, they'll tell you not to make medical claims, which, any of the ones that I belong to, I never did. All I can tell you is what it did for me. Don't know, but you got to realize we're individuals. But I think a lot of times it gets people that are just so desperate for something better that they'll try anything. And then sometimes they go down so many rabbit holes, then they get to the point where they're like, well, there's nothing that can help.
Yep.
And then they just try to go into acceptance to say that this is just the way my life is. And it doesn't have to be that way. Because I think everything is fixable to a degree, for the most part. There's a lot we can control.
Absolutely. Yep. And mindfulness, and that is a huge factor in that. And that nervous system regulation is often overlooked in the wellness space. I can give you all the healthy things and tell you to do, get rid of all the toxins. But if your nervous system's still a wreck, it's just not going to stick. Right. And people just don't take that piece into seriousness of how stress really is a silent killer.
Yeah, it is. It really is. So how do you balance the science of functional nutrition with holistic principles and mindfulness, all of that in your coaching practice? How do you balance all of those?
Yeah, so epigenetics, nutrigenomics, what I do is all scientifically proven, and I'm a nerd, so I like that stuff, right? But I also know that there are certain things like quantum physics that people can't explain, and that we know that has scientifically also been proven energetically that makes a difference in our bodies and how we operate. And that's where that mindfulness piece comes into play. Right? So making sure that you are creating a healthy space for yourself, mentally, physically, the shell that we're in, a temporary being, integrating all of that stuff, because you do feel different when you do mindfulness practices, even if it doesn't make sense. Just like anything else, you don't need to know how it works. You just need to know that it does. That's it. And so trusting enough to know that maybe I could try this. Maybe it feels weird and uncomfortable in the beginning, but anything new does, right? Yeah. And so the holistic approach for me is really taking, shadow work. It's taking, the nervous system regulation. It's taking energy centers and chakras and yoga and all of these things that have different modalities with the same purpose, and integrating them all together in a way that people can kind of pick which ones work for them best. Because some people like Tai Chi. Not for me. Some people like Qigong. Definitely not for me. I like yoga. Yoga's good for me, right? I like sound baths. I like those things. I like to feel those things. But if I had never experienced them, I wouldn't know what I liked and what I didn't. And so that's why in my program, I have different experts that come in so you can experience a little bit of those things and be like, this one feels good. I feel like this is comfortable but uncomfortable enough that I could, maybe align with this type of thing. EFT, tapping. Some people don't resonate with tapping, but they will do other different modalities, right? And so being able to find something that works for each person and their experience on their journey, because they may circle back in like 2 years and be like, oh, I've done all these things and I'm like here now and now I want to do this, And so just that slight little introduction of like, you don't have to understand it. It just does.
Yeah. Now, you and I are very similar in that, because that's what I told people. It's like what works for me may not work for you, but there are a ton of things out there. It's not just, well, it's this or nothing, because there's lots to choose from.
Exactly. And I don't want to be the expert in everything. I will absolutely 110% share all of my experiences
no one has
in
time
those
for
areas.
that.
No, but I'll share my experience in that and be like, hey, this is what I've done. This is what it's done for me. I suggest doing that or something like that. So here's an expert. Like pick from one of these vetted awesome people that I know that you can go through and connect with. So
yeah. Or you may even know them well enough to know who they might resonate with, because that's a big part of it too. Because you could have somebody that's really good at what they're doing, but if they're totally opposite of you, it's just, it's just like, that's just not a work in progress either.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So looking ahead, what do you envision for the future of functional nutrition and the role of mindfulness in promoting optimal health and wellness?
I feel like at this time we're kind of at a pivotal piece in the holistic realm of like more and more people are becoming familiar with it because they're simply fed up with traditional wellness, right? It's sick care. It's not health care. And traditionally in medicine, you go backwards, right? Like, oh, you have a symptom. Let's figure out what we need to do, right? Instead of preventing. And that's like, I've had parents have their kids tested with this genetic blueprint. So their kids have that knowledge going forward. Like, how powerful is that to be able to be like, hey, kid, here's the things you always need to do to make sure that you don't end up like your great grandma or grandpa and have heart problems. Like what a gift that is. And so I feel like at this time, more and more people are open to different things because just the traditional route's not working. They're seeing that there's poison in our food, that everything is toxic. Like there's just more people waking up and being like, this is not the world that I want to live in. How did we even get here?
Yeah. Yeah. How did we?
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned some books that you wrote. So you published books as well. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I'm a co-author in a couple sales and leadership books. So
okay.
My previous lifetime before I got into nutrition, but I keep getting this urge of like, maybe I should write something, but I don't really know. So at some point when
I was
universe
just going to
says
say,
it's time.
I think you do know, because I think you have a journey and you probably could do one on your experiences for MTHR.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I've had people over the years be like, oh, and I've had a couple publishers be like, yeah, we'll publish you, like, no problem. And I'm like, okay, whenever I get there, when the time is right. But that's not my living, like that's where I'm at right now. Like it's a thing. And at some point when I feel called and led and pulled, then that's when it will be. But I used to make all these 6 lists and do all these crazy things and like account for every minute of every day and cram everything in. I just don't live like that anymore. It's too stressful. Like why? I don't want to do that. Yeah. I get to choose, right? Like in this body, how I want my life to be. And that's not how I want it to be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. That is too stressful. I can't do the whole back to back things. It's like every now and then I might cram one day, but after that I'm like, whew, okay, that was enough. Got to level out.
Yep, exactly. That's where your potato days come into play.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yep. So we have a few minutes left for today. What is the most important thing that you want people to know?
I think the most important thing to know is that comprehensive testing is the absolute key and the foundation to do anything with this. So if you're just hearing about this for the first time, maybe you've got symptoms and you're not really sure, you go to look up MTHFR, I don't want you to go to Google because that's obviously what I try to keep people off of. Because Dr. Google has contradictory things and it can stress you out more. But if you do end up doing that, looking at the symptoms, or go to my TikTok, one of my pins, my first initial pinned viral one was some of the symptoms. There's over 200 things, right? The methylation has a part in, and those primary ones, pregnancy loss, infertility, ADHD, autism, those are the reasons a lot of people come to me. And simply by knowing the other genes, not just MTHFR, but MTRR, MTFD1, there's so many other ones that we look at, and that's just a few of them, that are tied to methylation. Mm-hmm. You know one, but you don't know all of them. So I would definitely suggest getting tested just to see, because 40 to 60% of the population carries this gene.
Wow.
And you may or may not be affected by it, right? But think about it like growing up, right? We didn't have the toxins that we do now, Laura. Like,
No.
our life was different. We went outside and played. We didn't have screens in front of us
No,
all
because
day
now we
long.
want everything to grow faster and grow bigger, and so we keep changing things and modifying it.
Yeah, exactly. And just kids, the way they grow up nowadays is different, right? We have the kids are in front of a screen all day long. Now, granted, when I was growing up, I had my, Super Nintendo, like, so I was on there, but it just wasn't a thing. Like, you were, get outside and play. Go. Like, like, see you later. Get out of the house. I don't want to see ya. And so, your kids got the vitamin D from the sun because they were outside. They weren't vitamin D, deficient because they were stuck inside all day long. And so just little small things that we do now that have changed in our lifestyles, not only that, but our food, all that just comes into such a factor. So getting that comprehensive blueprint just to know, like, I do have it. Am I being affected now? Do I have any symptoms of this? No. Awesome. That means you need to keep doing the things that you're doing. Keep with the mindfulness. Keep, reducing the stress as best as you can. Keep avoiding those toxins. Get non-toxic products. All the things that you need to be doing to support your genes and optimization, you'll be able to continue to do. But you'll also have the power to know if something does come up, let me look into that a little bit more. Let me get curious. And I feel like curiosity, there's that saying, curiosity killed the cat. I don't think so. I don't know who came up with that, but that's the dumbest saying ever. Because curiosity is what brings awareness.
Right.
And that curiosity is going to allow you to move different through life when you know the answers, or at least where things are coming from. So you can make different choices as you progress down the line.
And it allows you to learn and grow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And isn't that why we're here? Like, who wants to stay stuck in the same body with, like, getting older and painful with the same mindset for the rest of their life? Ew.
Yeah. So if someone thinks they might have some of them and maybe they are going to the doctor, what should what that conversation look like, or what should they ask the doctor about or to test for?
So unfortunately, a lot of people have gone to their doctors and their doctors aren't aware of it. They come to me and they're like, my doctor does nothing, or my doctor just said take a methylated vitamin and now I'm suicidal. Like, I've had those conversations with people. And so you can ask, like, can you do a test? Now, can you go do a simple test from like 23andMe? Sure. But again, you're not going to have anything more than like, yes, you have it, like 1 or 2 copies. So You're not going to have that information that you really need to make a sustainable change. So the conversation with your doctor is, hey, here's some symptoms. Here's what I'm thinking. Is this something you're familiar with? Asking them first and interviewing them. Like, you hired your doctor. You can fire them too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's amazing how sometimes we get stuck saying, well, he said this that doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily mean he's right.
Nope.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just interviewing them, see if they know anything about it first off, and then really getting into your family history, because seeing how some of those things are passed down the line, everything is genetic. Everything. There's no way around. Like, that's how we are made.
Yeah, but that also doesn't mean you don't have to accept it, that's your life.
Right.
There is stuff you can do about it.
And there's studies of twins that have the same situations. One grew up and became an adult, and they lived a terrible, crappy life because their food choices and all that. And the other twin over here, same genes because they're identical, completely healthy. So all that was different for them was their lifestyle, stress, food, nutrition, all of that stuff. So those things are playing a factor in every single person, no matter what your genes are. So if you're able to right now to manage your stress and to take care of yourself, those genes are likely not turned on. Just because you have them doesn't mean it's the end of the world.
Right. Well, that is such a wealth of knowledge for you. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey and your experiences with people.
Absolutely.
I hope anyone listening out there that may have some of these symptoms or want to know what some of the symptoms are. Again, if we'll put this back up here too. If you do want more information about MTHFR, you can just text this number on the top of the screen. But I do want to thank you for joining us and for sharing that with everyone. And everyone, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, obviously, Rhiannon's very easy to talk to. She's very knowledgeable and passionate about this. So please reach out to her and get some support.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And everybody, we will see you next week.